And then I'll let our friends from the Empire Center take it away. But just for like the backstory, Tina and I have always talked about best practices within transparency for districts and just education across the state. So it's really no surprise that we thought this into fruition by hosting a FOIL party of some sorts. The National Parents Union has utilized the foiling technique and tactic to gain access to records within plenty of school districts across the state. And it's pretty much supported a lot of the requests that we would identify within the Family Educational Rights Privacy Act, which is FERPA. So it's really supporting parents to obtaining specific documentations and records that districts kind of keep it hidden in the corners. So I'm really excited to introduce some co-conspirators in this education advocacy work. We have Emily DiVertola, Education Policy Analyst, and Cam Macdonald, Adjunct Fellow at the Empire Center for Public Policy. They're going to take us through the process of where to find data that's relevant to schools and what you're looking to collect for your students, and then just the overall foiling process. So I'm going to turn it over to Emily and Cam.
Hi guys, I'm going to kick it over to Cam in a second, but my name is Emily. I'm with the Empire Center, do education research over there, and we're always very motivated to see parents that care enough to go as far as foiling their districts to get the information that they're interested in seeing that they deserve to see. So please do consider us a resource. I'm going to let Cam go over a little bit about what the FOIL process is like. I'm going to explain where you can find some resources that will help you become more familiar with what is required of schools to report and when, and then address some of your questions that Ashara gave to me. I know you had some specific things that you were curious about. So kick it over to you, Cam.
Great. So I am Cam Macdonald. In addition to being an adjunct fellow at the Empire Center, I'm the executive director of the Government Justice Center, which is a public interest pro bono law firm that brings litigation against state and local governments. And about half of my caseload or more is freedom of information law lawsuits against different agencies around the state. So what I could tell from the agenda I was sent was that it may be a good idea to start from the beginning. And there we go. With just what is FOIL? You've been invited to a FOIL party. So what does FOIL mean? And FOIL is stands for the Freedom of Information Law. You may have heard it in other contexts as FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act, which is the federal version of what this is. But basically, the Freedom of Information Law was passed in New York 50 years ago with a presumption that the public should have access to the records of its state and local agencies. In fact, the legislative intent had this sort of very positive statement. We can talk further about whether it's actually adhered to, but basically they said the people's right to know the process of governmental decision-making and to review the documents and statistics leading to determinations is basic to our society. Access to such information should not be thwarted by shrouding it with a cloak of secrecy or confidentiality. The government is the public's business, and the public should have access to the records of government. So that's a great statement. What does that mean? What records can you get? And this is where there can be some confusion. What you are entitled to to get in a FOIL request is actual records that exist. To the extent that a record doesn't exist, you can get something that is perhaps like a report from a database. So, if there's perhaps a spreadsheet containing a bunch of different series of a bunch of data, you may be able to ask for a school district to run a report from to create a subset of that data. You cannot ask an agency to create records for you. And we can talk about that a little bit later when we talk about some details of some types of requests that you all would like to make, that I understand you'd like to make. So then that means that a FOIL request has to be for records and not for information that you would like that they would need to compile or derive from other information. That's essentially your job. So where to find that information? Under the law, agencies like school districts are supposed to make a list of records that are available under the Freedom of Information law. I find that school districts don't tend to do that. They do tend to have some information about public access to records by going on their website, and basically usually under a tab for the Board of Education, you can find the school's policies, and under a subheading there's usually a subheading called Community Relations and then Public Access to Records. And within that, you can find out, get some information about how to access public records from a school district. So then the question is, how do you request them? The first thing you need to do is you need to identify the district's designated FOIL officer or records access officer. It's supposed to be somewhere on the district's website. Again, my experience is that that's not easily found. Sometimes the best way to find it is to go straight down to the bottom of the home landing page of the district and look for a heading for a link for FOIL requests or a contact us button, and you may find the FOIL information there. Sometimes you just need to do a site search with FOIL in it to get that person, or you just need to call the district directly and ask who is the person, the records access officer, or the person I submit a FOIL request to. So then how do you go about requesting the records? Districts may have a FOIL request form to be filled out and submitted. They can't make you fill out such a form. So if you think it's easiest for you to print off their form, fill it out, scan it, and email it and submit it back to them, you're free to do that. But you can, in fact, just insist that they take your request and accept it by mail or email in your preferred format. Now, what you want to do when you do it is you want to write out your request being specific about the records you're requesting and include information like names and dates and other details like unique keywords that help narrow your request and aid in locating the records. So then what is exactly are all the pieces of information you want to include in your request? First, you want to start with just make sure they have your name, phone number, and email. Some districts ask for your home address. It shouldn't really be necessary for them to give them your address. If you want to, you can, but it's not something they should be able to insist on. Make sure that you're saying I'm requesting the records under the Freedom of Information law. That just makes sure everybody knows that this is in fact a Freedom of Information law request, because that invokes certain deadlines they must adhere to and rules for responding to the request. As I mentioned, you want to describe the records as well as you can. Be as specific as you can and be reasonable about it. You know, if you know you want something from a short time frame, name that time frame. If it's something, for instance, you want just in the year 2023, say I want records from January 1, 2023 to this date. And then if you know that it's going to have some keyword, if it's maybe email communications that may have some very unique word in it, name that word. Do what you can to make it easier for them and be reasonable for the district. And then make sure you specify how you want the records. In most cases, you should be able to just get them emailed to you electronically in PDF format. If it's something that should be from a database, it's a good idea to ask for it to be sent to you in Microsoft Excel or a spreadsheet format. So that you can actually, manipulate the data if that's something you're looking to do. So the Empire Center does its, it does a ton of work by getting reams and reams of raw data in the form of spreadsheets from the state and local agencies, and then doing the work on that data itself. So I would recommend in most cases, asking for electronic records and then trying to get them in their native format as often as possible. Districts can charge if they need to give you hard copies. If you're asking for hard copies, they can charge you 25 cents per copy. So, and they are supposed to ask you how much you want to pay. But if you want to, cut to the chase and say, I'll spend up to $25 or $50 or whatever the amount is for hard copies, if you must give us hard copies, say that up front, and you will just, it will cause you to, the process to go just a little bit quicker. So then once you've submitted your request, what happens next? The district will have 5 days to acknowledge your request. Under the law, they're actually supposed to either respond to your, provide the records or deny your request or acknowledge it and give you a date when they'll actually respond to your request. But in practice, what has happened over time is that you can expect in a week them to get back to you and say, it's going to take us additional time to answer your request. Typically, that time is another 20 business days. That's basically what the law says. Sometimes you'll get something that says, we're going to get you a further response 20 business days from today. And then 20 business days after that, you get an update saying it's going to take us additional time. At that point, you could decide that they're just taking too long, and that's something called a constructive denial, or they might just deny your request. And at that point, you have rights where you can do what's called an administrative appeal, where you can ask for the FOIL appeals officer. It's typically in a school district, the superintendent, and you can appeal the denial of your request, or you can appeal the constructive denial of your request. A constructive denial usually happens when there's inordinate delay, where they're saying it's going to take us 3 months to get these records to you. And, sometimes it's just that they're cynically trying to, maybe get past the recent board elections or something like that. So you can say, this is taking too long. You've constructively denied my case. I'm appealing your constructive denial. Once you do that, the district has 10 business days to respond to your appeal, and you will either win or lose on that proposition. If your appeal is denied, you still have recourse. You can go to your county Supreme Court in what's called an Article 78 proceeding, and you've got 4 months to bring that action. The problem with going to court is it's not cheap. An organization like mine exists because it costs $350 just to file a case in the court, and all that sort of thing can be intimidating. So if you were to run into something like that issue, I would encourage you to contact me to see how somebody like me could help. Finally, you're not necessarily going to get all the records because there's something called exceptions to disclosure. You will find sometimes that the response will say, here are your records, but we have withheld a certain number. And or you will receive records and there will be information redacted out. There'll be blacked out parts of the records. The exceptions that you probably are all going to be most familiar with are going to relate to privacy. So an agency can withhold records if disclosing them would be an unwarranted invasion of someone's privacy. You would also find that they will withhold records under something that's given the moniker deliberative privilege and that would typically be, district communications that are expressing opinions. So the idea is the exception is supposed to exist so that people can have candid conversations about things without being raked over the coals by the public for expressing, some opinion that they later regret. A final thing that would be unique to the types of requests you all would make is that you cannot ask for examination questions or answers from examinations that are requested prior to the final administration of the examination. So that was in the news last year, if you recall, right around this time after the tragic shooting in Buffalo, when the regents exam was canceled due to a particular question. News media asked for that question, and NICEAD withheld it on that exception because it might be one they administer at some future time. So that's sort of the basics of FOIL. I'll turn it over to Emily for what she's going to offer.
Thank you, Cam. And for the parents who have just joined, just got an overview of what the FOIL process looks like. And I'm basically just going to walk you through where you can find some resources that will help you become familiar with what is required of schools to report and in what timeline. That way you know what to ask your districts for and when. So I'm just going to share my screen quickly. A moment. Okay, should work. All right, can everyone see this Microsoft Word document?
Yeah.
So I know you had some specific things that you were interested in looking at, so I'm going to get to that, but I just wanted to start with the basics. If you're not familiar, the basic educational data system is where all of schools' records are kept, essentially. So open that up here just so you can see what it looks like. So I'll be able to send you this document so you have all these links for yourself, but that's a good place to start. Just become familiar with what's required of schools. And then there are general reporting requirements and some timelines. So I'll again show you what those look like. This is on NICED's website. They have a dedicated special education data database, which I'll show you. The report card database, which I'm sure a lot of you have seen. So this is sort of where you would want to start in looking for what is required of schools to report. And then this is a timeline. This is what the 2022-2023 deadline list looks like. So I think down on page 6 is where you'll find things relevant to special education data. And a lot of those timelines are coming up this month and next month. So yeah, special education data due here. So again, I'll send you these links so you have them yourself. But that's sort of general where you can find what is required of schools to report and when. As far as district achievement data, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the school report card database, but I'll open it up here just in case you aren't. They have information by schools and by district and statewide, so you can type in a specific school's name, a district's name, and learn about what types of students they enroll, how they're doing on state assessments, how much they're spending per pupil, all that sort of information. So I pulled up one example, the Buffalo School District. This is what their school report card looks like. So at a glance, you can see how many students they have, what the average class size looks like, how much they spend per pupil. And if you click on this pencil here, you can get summaries of their proficiency rates on state assessments. So this is what Buffalo's looks like. A little sad in some areas. So that's where you can find district and school achievement data. And they keep the big spreadsheets, the Excel versions of that to do large scale analysis here in the BEDS homepage. And if you're ever poking around on there, if you want any deep analysis done, please do consider us a resource. I'm in this report card database all the time. So I know you had some specific questions as far as what is required for schools to report on special education. So again, I'm just going to show you where to find that information really quick. So their dedicated special education database is here. They have all of their archived reports, data summaries, and then I'll show you again their deadlines. So this is what is required of schools to report as it relates to special education data. And here on the right is all of the due dates. So if you become familiar with this, then you'll know what to ask your district for and when. So any questions on that so far? And again, I'll be able to send you this document so you have this this as a link, and my contact information is on here too. So if you're going through any of these and you have any questions, please do reach out. I know you had some questions too on specifically number of times parents have requested mediation or due process, and educators and administrators that live in your district. So if there are no questions on what I just talked about, I think I might kick it over to Cam for those questions.
Sure. So what Emily was pointing to with respect to the reporting to the to NICEAD is kind of how you would need to go about finding the information from the schools. So I don't think you would, for instance, for your district, would be able, in question number 3, be very easily be able to get that information off of NICEAD's website. It's not broken out. I don't know if it's broken out by school district and so on. But if there is information that districts must report to the state, you should be able to get copies of the reports that they send to the state to get the information that you are looking for. So that's what I was talking about earlier, where you need to be requesting records that already exist. Which leads us to question number 4, which was number of times parents have requested mediation or due process. As I mentioned, that probably runs into lots of privacy concerns and so on. But my position is that the existence of records are facts themselves, and the public is entitled to know that information. And so you could ask, for instance, if the district asked for the district's log of mediation requests or due process requests, assuming that they maybe can, keep some sort of record of, a master list. And you can, in your request, say, obviously, you can redact this as appropriately to protect student privacy and private information. And what you would then have is you would have a list, you would have a number of entries on a page where you would be able to get some sense of what the nature of the requests were. You may be able to ask for the requests themselves that were made to see and ask for those to be redacted. You might run into lots of trouble because it doesn't run into the privacy issues. With respect to question 5, that's a good one. I don't really have an answer for that, because that, again, is something where you would probably, I can't imagine that a district keeps records of the percent of educators or administrators who live in the school district. But if it was really important to you and you wanted to try to figure it out, the Freedom of Information Law does require a school district to maintain a list of all of its employees with their titles and their salary amounts. And your county board of elections and your school board and your school district have voter rolls. And so somebody could do the hard work of comparing lists to get a sense of what those percentages are. That's the type of thing the Empire Center does. It gets disparate lists and compares data and reaches conclusions. Looking at the chat, I see, who do you contact if your district hasn't submitted reports by the state deadline? I guess you could contact the state and ask why your district hasn't, and trying to get the state to put some pressure on your district if that's the case. You could ask at a public meeting why the district's not meeting its reporting requirements. A letter to the superintendent asking why it's not doing its job. I think those would be the avenues you could take. That's a little bit out of my area of expertise. The next question: are special education director contracts publicly available, like teacher and superintendent contracts are available? So yes, because that's a public record. You should be able to FOIL them. In a lot of places, the teacher and superintendent contracts aren't necessarily that available. And the Empire Center, for instance, sends out literally thousands of requests around the state to state and local governments for their collective bargaining agreements and superintendent contracts, and keeps them on a database on see-through-new-york.net. See-through-ny.net actually is where you can go for those contracts. But if there is a contract that is between the school district and anyone, that is a public contract, a public record that you should be able to get under a FOIL request. Yeah, see-through-new-york.net will only have it will have some administrative staff contracts and primarily teachers, superintendent, and administrative staff contracts.
Cam, did you see this question here? Would the district have the number of disabled employees?
Employees. I don't know. I don't know if that's something they would need to report anywhere on employees. I mean, I know for sure for students, yes.
I'm not sure either.
You can ask. Let's see. A district refuses to provide responsive FOIL records electronically, even if they're maintained on the computer. Is that allowed there? I don't believe they're supposed. I do not believe that's the case. I can follow up on that. I don't know that I can get the answer right immediately, right now. We don't usually run into anybody being that unreasonable. Let me see if I can find it immediately. And if you've got if your district is being difficult about providing the records electronically, one avenue too is to get an advisory opinion from the Committee on Open Government. That is one of their functions, and I have to think that they would give a favorable advisory opinion that that the record should be produced electronically. iReady to assess students' reading and math. What's the data that you would be looking for? The results of the assessment, the iReady assessments? Yes, you should be able to get that completed information. It may be, you would not be able to get it on the student level, but to the extent that they're amalgamating it or can eliminate identifying information for students, you should be able to get the iReady assessment data. The question is knowing how many students are at grade level by third grade. I would assume that the district compiles the results of the iReady assessments and knows if they have compiled them into a record and know the count, you should be able to FOIL for and get that record with that count. And sometimes I'll give you this too. Sometimes freedom of information law requests can be as informative for what they say is not there. So one would think that if the school is doing iReady assessments of reading and math and isn't figuring out the number of students at the level and doesn't have that record, that's as much of an indictment about what they're doing as a school district as whatever those results may be, if that makes any sense. Sometimes there's as much information in what's not there as there is in or there's a different type of information in what doesn't exist that's helpful to you as a parent. All right. So I'm going to put my contact information in. I'm going to put my email address in here. So is it Denora? You can contact me directly and I'll help you with this school district. Sometimes a stern letter from a law firm works.
So Tina was also asking about curriculum information. Can she FOIL to figure out which curriculum schools are using?
Yeah, you should be able to. That should be that's public information that you should be able to FOIL for. I know it's become very sensitive these days. And a little bit of a political football in lots of parts of the country. But the reality is that is something you should be able to get your hands on. The next question in the chat is keeping track of students found through child find and which were addressed via parent requests for evaluations. I will confess I have no idea what child find means. This is we're outside of my area here.
I imagine that would be on that same timeline that I just showed you for this dedicated special ed database. So I'll take a look at that timeline again.
Child find is the law that the schools have to identify students with any suspected disabilities.
Okay.
So if there's any place to find which children came to evaluation process via the school versus parent request.
Yeah, I would hope that would be something that the state would track through reporting. So Emily, if you could figure that out to see if there's anything that's done reporting that wise. Otherwise, that would be an important thing for somebody to lobby for, to see if it might even be in the law that there needs to be reporting on it. So we can look that up. Was there anything about the process that was too simple or not explained enough? So I don't want anybody to be intimidated from the idea of submitting FOIL requests. It sounds like some are very experienced with it. Some this might have been new for. So if there's anything I can answer on just that process, so nobody's intimidated by it.
Cam, maybe just, are you able to pull up a district website and just kind of screen share and walk folks through it so they just know? And I know districts have different landing pages for the FOIL request, but even to show them an example.
Oh yeah, one of your school districts. I think there was
Rochester City School District. I mean, I've found that page, but.
All right, here we go. I think so. I think I saw Gates Chili in the earlier emails. So you've got, wow, what are they? The Spartans or something? So I mean, this is a pretty typical page. This is the landing page. I think this is actually a pretty good school district for this, from what I saw this week. So I went down to, if I go down to the bottom, they've got to contact us. And they've got the link for Freedom of Information Law requests with an updated address.
I want to see what you wrote now.
Pardon me? And so, you know, here they suggest you do their request form, which it's no big deal, but it's a little bit of a pain to print off, fill out, scan, and send back. So I'm anti that, but it's pretty straightforward. You can just get to Ms. Brown's email address and just say in the subject line FOIL requests, and off you go. Let's try the Rochester City School District. So we can go down the bottom. See if there's anything that's obvious. Freedom of information request, that's pretty good. They send you right there and give you an email address to go to. They even give you, I'm impressed. They give you the link to the freedom of information law and so on. So this is this is pretty good, how they walk you through what to ask and how to ask and so on. So kudos to the Rochester City School District here. And in fact, some will have this online form, which is really easy to do and use. The only thing I would suggest with that is, if you do it, is that you take a screenshot of the form before you submit it. Some of the form, some of these services will actually send you an email to your email address, and you'll have it. You'll have your request. Oh, I'm looking at my own screen, sorry. But for your records, take a screenshot of this just in case, because I have done it where I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot that I sent that request to that agency 2 months ago. So that would be my piece of advice if you use one of these forms, but use them because they're easy. Just do a screenshot so you have it. So that's kind of where you can sometimes also find from I'll take you to the Board of Education, board policies, where I was telling you about what you can find for the records. Let's see, school board. You have to root around. Sometimes it's better than others. It seems like the districts have a kind of a standard way of organizing their policies across the state, but it's not working here on this particular one. Superintendent, maybe we can go back to the district. Community involvement. So unfortunately, you do need to root around school district records. You can find their school district records policy to print off. That's pretty up to date. And get some information about what they have, their retention and disposition schedules and so on, their privacy policy, etc. So, you know, if you all, I'm sure, are very familiar with rooting around on school district websites.
I just tried to search up on Niagara Falls for ours, and yeah, it's not identical to the way the other two that you screen shared with, but I did find it under records in the records department, and you send a written request to human resources. That sound about right? And you tell them which record you're looking for?
Yeah, that's a little different. That it would be human resources.
Is it? That's what I was curious, because when I
Yeah.
got there, it didn't look like what you found. I found it says access to public records, information request in accordance with, you know, Freedom of Information Act. And it's like, it's a Word
Okay,
document.
yeah.
It's
So
a
then
Word
that's
document, and you fill out which one you're looking for.
Right. Yeah.
Doesn't
So
tell
that
you.
works.
Oh, it does say submit completed form to human resources. So I guess you would mail this in unless you can find her email address. Let's see. So I guess like you were saying, it's kind of different. Yeah, the email address isn't there for the human resources administrator, but I guess that's
so. Here, I'll share my school district with you so you can see how not to do it.
I was late on. Where are you from?
I'm outside of Albany. So
Okay.
my school district is Bethlehem Central. You can see here, here's the different things. I go down to the bottom. They don't even have a contact us. I can find all their social media. If all else fails, by the way, the ultimate FOIL officer is the head of the school system, the superintendent. So if all else fails, you can pop a FOIL request off to the superintendent of the schools. So Ms. Monroe in my case. So here I look, okay, they've got the contact us up at the top. And I go in and there's nothing here for FOIL. So the other thing I can do is just search on the website, and it looks like you got to go to the finance department to make a FOIL request. And you can see I told them 2 months ago that the email address is incorrect, and they still haven't fixed it because a new business manager started last summer. And this is the former one, Judith Kehoe's email address. So my district's really lagging here. But that was multiple steps I had to take, but that was an example of how you can do this by just searching within the district's website for how to make a FOIL request. As it turns out, when I do email this address, he gets the requests from me. Emily does not want me to get started on why I FOIL my school board.
Don't get him started, please. I heard multiple people are looking forward to an early bedtime. This is Cam's hobby and what he does for a living, I could say.
That could be a topic for another talk.
Yeah. The final request, another question is, do districts have to disclose which FOIL requests were granted? You can actually FOIL for their FOILs. So
Interesting.
I have done that. I have FOILed for FOILs from the Attorney General and various others, just to see how long they take and what types of requests they get. I mean, those are all public records too.
Love it.
We in fact advocate for people like districts putting a log out of what their FOIL requests are and what their responses are. And if they're asked for the same documents more than 3 times in a year, just post those online. We call that proactive disclosure, which there's not enough of. So if you're advocating at your school district, advocate for proactive disclosure. It makes life easier for everyone.
Thank you so much for coming in. Is there anything that parents or that we could do to help or support, or any tips for parents, I think, overall, maybe as we close out here?
Tips for parents? I mean, be happy warriors about it. You know, don't be instantly adversarial. You know, the Empire Center does thousands and thousands of requests a year, and they know if they're asking for something maybe a little bit different, a little bit of a, you know, unique request, they will call in advance and say, how can I make this request so that you can fill my request? So that's one way to go about it. You know, sort of, I don't want to overuse the word partner, but be partners, I guess, at some level. They've got an obligation to get you the information. You have a right to that information, but I mean, maybe just don't stomp all over them with your rights. Try to be reasonable and accommodating, and just have a conversation. What's the best way for me to ask for this information? You know, I know you need to submit these reports to the state every year at such and such a time. When would be the best time for me to ask for those, and in what format do you have them? And I'll make my request accordingly.
Yeah. And I would say, don't give up. You're not alone in this fight. We're definitely here to support. And we talk to parents of, you know, supporting kids of all needs. And, you know, it's a tough fight, but you're not alone, and we're here to support you. And just know that every time that you ask for more transparency and more accountability from your districts, the more that they see that they have to. So don't give up. And yeah, we're here to support. Definitely consider us a resource for anything that you need.
Well, likewise, if you or anyone you know has a struggling learner or reader, send them our way too. Thank you for generously sharing your time with us tonight. And yeah, let's stay in touch for sure.
Definitely.
I was driving when you shared those links earlier, Emily.